Chris Mannix for SI.com alongside Rohan Nedkarni and Howard Beck. Well, fellas, this is going to be a very interesting year with empty arenas and a truncated schedule, but there are some interesting storylines that go with this season. Rohan, give me your most interesting storyline for the year.
Listen, there are obviously 100 different ways you could go with this, and I know people are tired of phrases like unprecedented and in these uncertain times, but I do think one of the most fascinating things about this NBA season is the short layoff for some teams, and incredibly long layoff for others. I mean, you have some teams that haven't played a game in March. You have players like Steph Curry, who has played only 5 games the last year, Kevin Durant, who hasn't played in almost a year and a half. Then you have on the other end of the spectrum, LeBron James and the Lakers, who just played in the finals 10 weeks ago. I'm really curious to see, are there going to be health effects on these teams who made deep runs in the bubble? And beyond that, how are they going to handle the short layoff? Are the Heat and Lakers going to rest their guys more than other teams? I do think that is going to be hanging over this season. And we might also just get a fascinating look at what the short layoff is going to have on these guys' bodies. What are the consequences of that? I think we're all going to find out in real time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember why we have the short layoff for some teams and the really long for other teams. And it's because of the pandemic. And my most intriguing storyline of the season is about that. The NBA is resuming now with no bubble, no mini bubbles, no regional bubbles, no anything. They're back in home markets. They're traveling again. Guys are living at home. They're with their families, their kids. People are coming and going. The NBA did an incredible job in the bubble, but that was the easy part, because if you put everybody together and shut out the rest of the world, you don't have to worry about the virus. Well, they have to now. We've seen how this has impacted other sports and other leagues, and now it's the NBA's turn to try to deal with this in the real world, not in a bubble. And guys, I don't want to be dour about this or negative. They'll do as great a job as they possibly can, and I think everyone will do their best. But it is inevitable, as widespread as this virus is, that people are going to catch it in the NBA. There's going to be teams affected, players affected. And the question is, how well can they contain it? And can they avoid having to cancel or postpone games or have any other major ripple effects over the course of this season?
Yeah, Howard, for me, everything else is secondary to that. You know, we can discuss roster maneuvers and Drew Holiday's fit with Giannis and no Gordon Hayward in Boston, but it's all about the impact of COVID-19. The NBA had an option back into some kind of bubble environment. No, they were not going to reconvene in Central Florida and have a 6-month bubble. That was never going to be an option. But on these general manager calls, there was discussions about regional bubbles, 5, maybe 6, sort of pods where you have teams go in for a month at a time and then come out for 2 weeks to spend time with their families and resume some normalcy there. The NBA elected not to do that for various reasons, but the most significant is that they are, at some point, hoping to get some of that fan revenue back. There are a handful of teams that are going to be allowing fans into the arena. There is hope in the league office that as time goes on and this vaccine starts to take hold, maybe more fans will come in. So they're worried about their bottom line. They're trying to make as much money as they possibly can. But Rohan, it's a roll of the dice. It's a big time gamble because the integrity of these games are going to be compromised if too many players catch the virus and are forced to sit out for 10 or 12 days, to the point where I certainly hope that the NBA has a backup plan in place, or at least a bubble on hold or a bubble environment on hold for them to be able to finish their season.
I think the NBA, to your point, Chris, is also presented with kind of a fascinating set of challenges that other leagues weren't. They don't play only once a week like the NFL. It's not like baseball where it's much easier to limit travel by playing series, or the NBA is trying something like that. The integrity of the games, I think, is going to be in question. But, in regards to will they ever set up another bubble, I do think what the NBA showed, and Howard mentioned this, they're going to try their best. Adam Silver's willing to be flexible. I think if it does take another bubble or another bubble type environment, I think there's a way to sell it because of the partnership they have with the players. I think we all know no one is dying to go back to Orlando or any one city for an extended period of time. But I do think the league will be willing to be flexible on that matter because they might not have any other choice.
Howard, what do you think quickly? Do you think another bubble is possible for the NBA if this season gets a little bit too hairy?
I think it'd be really hard to do on the fly, but I also think there's a reason the NBA decided to roll out the schedule in two parts. We only know the first half schedule. They're holding the second half because they want to see where we are, where the league is, where the world is before you plan for that second half of the season. And if they had to do it in another bubble, I think that is among the options that is still on the table, at least in theory.
Look, we say the virus doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't. It certainly targets, if you will, people that travel a lot, on planes a lot, hotels, things like that. So hopefully, the NBA won't have their season too badly impacted. For more, check us out over at SI.com.